G'day, I'm Bev Eagy and welcome to Tea Time. Today we're going to make Lamingtons. Now Lamingtons are a well-loved, famous dessert in Australia. And the thing I love about Australian desserts is most of them were invented in some kind of crisis, and they're such resourceful people. In fact, they remind me of the Pacific Northwest. They're just women here, they can make, the pantry's empty, the fridge is, and they'll whip up a meal, and this is kind of what happened to this lady. This is back at the turn of the century. She was a sheep shearer's wife, and her husband, they had properties there in Queensland that are as big as Texas. Don't tell anyone from Texas, but this is the truth. So anyway, the knucklehead she's married to doesn't tell her, but the governor of Queensland was coming for lunch and she didn't know. And in Australia, if you're having tea and you don't have some kind of a beautiful sweet or a cake or a slice or something to serve with tea, it's a major crisis. It's kind of like, it's akin to running out of milk and you can't make tea. That's another crisis, and I'll tell you that story later. But anyway, so she finds out without any notice that the governor's coming, and she was going to make, just put on something, put the kettle on, love. And she's like, what am I going to do? And she looked in the pantry and she had an old stale sponge cake. They just call it a sponge, and that's pretty much just in Oregon what you would call like a yellow cake, just your basic cake that you frost in, a birthday cake or something, just a basic yellow sponge. Anyway, but this one was a few days old and it was kind of hard, and it was like, what do you do with it? Well, that's what I'm going to tell you right now. That's where the Lamington. Now, the governor's name, I can't remember, but he was the Lord of something of Lamington from England. Most of the politicians of that day were Pommies or English. So anyway, that's where the name came back. So this is like cake, stale cake for the governor, or Lamington. And you can find this cake anywhere in Australia. But you start out with a stale sponge. What you could do is bake a yellow cake in like a sheet pan, and then just cut it into squares. I was very clever, and I just put the yellow cake, and I have recipes. The actual recipe of the cake isn't as important, but just do your family favorite, or call me. I'll give you mine. But this is just a nice moist sponge cake, and I left it out overnight with just a bit of parchment on top, and then I put it in the freezer because there's a process. She had this really hard sponge cake, and I'm going to just turn this out. Hopefully, use this parchment to see. Hopefully it'll come out nice. Well, they are very well behaved today. Okay, so this is a generous piece. You would cut it in this sort of this shape. I'm just saving time because I did it in these little mini loaf pans, and you can get these anywhere. So that's a little time-saving tip for you girls. So that's your sponge, and it's ready. So what she did, she cut it up, but then she thought, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And it's sort of tropical in Queensland, so the readily available ingredient would be coconut. So she had some coconut, and she had some chocolate. So she just whipped up, she melted some butter, and because I'm working here without my stove, I've pre-melted the butter in this saucepan, and it's 30 grams of butter. But now this recipe for the chocolate, you can kind of tweak it to how you like. I always ratchet up the cocoa ingredient or the chocolate, because I think you want more chocolate than what any recipe says. And who's ever going to say, uh-oh, it's too chocolatey? It never happens. So I'm going to go a little bit higher on that ingredient.